Today, what would really happen if I brought 3 of the strangest creatures from Animals Hospital into my world? Dr. Harlow, a doctor who sees everything as a medical emergency. He doesn't ask questions, he just starts treating you. Rattew, nervous, unpredictable, and obsessed with one thing, Retina. Wherever he goes, those pictures aren't far behind. Barney, the strangest anomaly of them all. He doesn't want gold, he doesn't want power, he just wants one thing. Coffee.
6 creatures, 6 completely different personalities. And today, I'll have to keep them all under control. Because once these anomalies enter my home, there's no telling what will happen next. We thought the abandoned animal hospital was empty. We were wrong. Before going inside, we gave the pets some strong coffee. We need it. Then we entered the darkest hospital hallway I'd ever seen. The shadows started moving. At first, I thought it was the lights. Then an unknown creature stepped from the corner. Our pets froze. Sparky, Warden, and Vazar were terrified. Something was definitely wrong. Warden sniffed the air. The smell of medicine came from nearby. Vazar floated ahead, using his glowing hand to light our path. Sparky followed behind, nervously watching the shadows. Then we found an old hospital room. I slowly opened the door. Inside, 3 strange eggs pulsed quietly on a medical couch. I moved closer. Something inside the egg was still alive. The pets exchanged nervous looks. None of us knew what they were. Suddenly, the red alarm lights switched on. A horrible screech echoed through the hallway. Something had found us. I didn't wait. I grabbed all 3 eggs and ran. The hospital anomalies chased after us, getting closer every second. Vizar raised his hand and activated the teleportation spell. A blinding flash filled the room, then we were gone. Seconds later, we were safely back home with the mysterious eggs. We placed each egg inside an incubator and waited to see what would happen. For hours, the pets stayed beside them, watching every tiny movement. Then we heard it. The glass began to crack. The first creature emerged, and it was Dr. Harlow. He looked at us with one terrifyingly serious expression. Then Rattew suddenly burst out of the second incubator. He was already nervous, restless, and clearly hiding something. Finally, Barney came tumbling out with a red briefcase in his hand. He looked even more nervous than Rattew, and that worried me. Then Dr. Harlow pulled out a giant medical kit.
Dr. Harlow noticed Sparky's strange green glow and immediately looked suspicious. Before Sparky could react, Harlow wrapped him completely in medical bandages. Meanwhile, Rattew pulled out a stack of posters and a bottle of glue. Then he covered almost the entire house with pictures of his sister, Retina. And Barney wouldn't stop running around me, begging for another cup of coffee. I stood in the middle of the chaos, wondering how my house became a hospital. A few days later, I turned my garage into a home for the anomalies. I built 3 custom terrariums, each designed for a completely different creature. Dr. Harlow's terrarium looked exactly like a tiny hospital ward. I even filled it with plush toys for him to examine. Harlow immediately started wrapping every toy in bandages. Rattew's terrarium was completely different. It was a giant maze with a running wheel. But somehow, the entire floor was already covered in papers and poster scraps. And Rattew was still adding new pictures of Retina to the walls. Then there was Barney, who got the most important upgrade of all, his own coffee machine. Barney was happier than I'd ever seen him. He finally had unlimited coffee.
See what's
But
inside.
then he pulled out his mysterious red briefcase.
Wow. This is
Inside were coffee beans, strange vials, and notes I definitely didn't understand. I walked past the terrariums, wondering what I'd accidentally brought home.
Dinner time finally came, so I prepared food for everyone. Barney got a whole canister of espresso. He looked extremely happy. Then he drank the entire thing in seconds.
slurp.
A few seconds later, Barney was vibrating with pure energy. Meanwhile, Vizar calmly floated over to his bowl of almonds. He started cracking them one by one, creating a surprisingly relaxing rhythm. Dr. Harlow completely ignored his food and focused on checking Varden's pulse. Varden wasn't impressed. One powerful sound wave sent Harlow flying backward. Rattew didn't even touch his food. Instead, he jumped straight out of his terrarium. He had something much more important to do. Another photo of Ratina. Eventually, the evening arrived, and everyone finally settled down for the night. The terrariums began to crackle and glow. Rattew suddenly started growing, his body stretching longer and longer. Inside the next terrarium, Dr. Harlow suddenly snapped, tearing through his toys. Then his face changed, revealing a massive mouth filled with sharp teeth. Barney wasn't doing any better. He began destroying his terrarium. And then Barney changed too. A terrifying mouth appeared across his face. All three terrariums were destroyed. My pets were no longer pets.
Now we are free.
I took one look at them and knew we had to leave immediately.
The next morning, we tested what my mutated pets could do. I prepared a few simple tests to measure their new power. First was Dr. Harlow. I sent him toward a training dummy. He destroyed it in seconds. I wasn't ready for that. Next was Rattew. A group of zombies waited for him. Rattew stretched his massive arms and grabbed them all. Seconds later, the entire group was gone. Then came Barney. I locked him inside a steel cage. He bit straight through the metal. That was terrifying.
Don't understand.
My pets were far more powerful than I'd imagined.
What have I done to you?
After the tests, we relaxed on the beach.
Tonight, we plot the course.
We
Smells
ate
great,
barbecue
guys.
around the fire and finally relaxed.
Yeah, this steak is perfect.
For a moment, everything felt peaceful.
Cheers to that.
We sat under the stars with coffee. Then something appeared. A glowing portal suddenly opened above us. The energy looked familiar. We returned to the hospital, but something was wrong. A gigantic green slime had taken over the building. Even the hospital staff seemed to be controlled. Slime covered everything. It looked extremely dangerous. There was no time to think. We had to fight. Suddenly, smaller anomalies rushed toward us. Sparky charged forward before they could surround us. One explosion cleared a path through the swarm. Vizar attacked from above, launching fireballs into the darkness. Sparks filled the corridor as the attacks hit. Then Varden slammed the ground with incredible force. Meanwhile, Dr. Harlow was saving the infected patients.
Hand me the adrenaline.
Rattew and Barney pushed toward the boss. But the green slime launched a wave of toxic slime.
Then, Barney pulled out something unexpected. A giant glass jar. Together, they forced the struggling slime inside. Barney quickly sealed the jar shut. The slime weakened as its glow slowly faded.
We did it.
The battle was over.
The one.
Dr. Harlow stayed behind to care for the remaining patients. The hospital was finally clean and peaceful again. Then, a glowing portal opened in the middle of the hallway.
I found this. I hope
Rattew
it
gave
helps.
me a photo of
perfect.
Ratina
Thank you,
as a
Ratty.
final gift.
She'll always for the
Barney
road, friend.
gave me a bag of coffee beans. Of course he did.
Thank you, Barney.
The
my
anomalies
friends.
stayed behind to
Fare you well.
protect the restored hospital. Then, my pets and I stepped through the portal. The portal closed behind us, leaving the hospital in silence. Back home, everything finally felt normal again. We collapsed onto the couch after the
that was quite the
craziest adventure
adventure.
ever.
Amazing,
And
doesn't it?
nothing sounded better than
perfect
hot
evening.
pizza after all that. We
Ah,
played
that was
games,
quite the
laughed
journey.
together, and finally enjoyed a
Creeper?
peaceful night.
Indeed.